the numbers from AT&T are fantastic. The fiber, the phone net ads, the churn rates, they really are firing on all cylinders. What they have in place is working for them. I think it's really hard to argue that. I'm not sure if you guys found any weaknesses in there that were that concerning. I think really it was just the business side. The rest of it actually seems really, really good.
Yeah. So, yeah, great quarter from AT&T. I said this many times on your podcast. I'm going to say it again. They're playing the long game and they're playing it well, right? Their fiber build is on point. It continues to grow and gain fiber customers. They're going to continue to do that. This is going to help, pay for their wireless network as well. No, so they're just they're this is what's called good execution, right? They're not doing a T-Mobile thing and saying, "Oh, let's just spend minimal amount of capex." They're putting their money in and they're investing in their business, right? So
Mm.
this is good, and they're playing the long game, and not to say that Verizon's not. Verizon is doing a great job too. They have a different ball game of execution, right? They're more about build the network fast,
I
reap
wonder
the
who said that
money later.
earlier today. I wonder who said that. Anybody else say that?
No, no. There's nothing wrong with Verizon's game. That's not. They've been on point. They're just executing a different plan. That's all. T-Mobile. Ugh, don't get me started with them, but we'll talk about them later. But no, but AT&T is great. They're playing the long game well.
All right, B, jump in.
I hear you. I hear you with the pettiness, neat. So, I still contend that AT&T and Verizon have different strategies. One is operating based on the fact that they have less assets to be able to deploy and be aggressive in the wireless space. So they're deploying the asset that they do have, which is plenty of fiber to their credit. And that's great. One of the things that I will say, I think Sneed is correct. From a growth standpoint, they're growing at a very healthy clip. So congratulations to them for that. That's great. I still would like to see that growth translate to meaningful growth in top line and bottom line revenues. It's not really happening at the speed that it probably should. If I'm a company that's growing an additional 400,000 phone ads every single quarter, which is supposed to be the most revenue accretive um, product that I sell, and then I had another 226,000 home internet customers, and I still lose in top line revenue, going from I think 30.4 to 30.2 or something like that. I mean, how is that showing you know meaningful growth in revenue? When you see it flow down, those top line revenues flow down to the bottom line in free cash flow. They were down in free cash flow as well, and I think that's something that you know I think Moose said the same or something similar about Verizon, but I thought AT&T was supposed to grow at a faster or a higher clip than Verizon, and it did to its credit. And yet, it still isn't finding a way to flip those amounts of that amount of growth into meaningful profitability. So what we know is that, and of course, we'll go over T-Mobile's numbers in a few minutes, but we still know that Verizon once again led in profitability, wireless service revenues, EBITDA, and free cash flows. So for all of the growth that we're about to talk about for the next umpteen minutes or hour, whatever, so they still both companies got beat by Big Red when it comes to earning money from the connections that they have. So, I mean, for me, I think the entire industry, including Verizon, has an opportunity to continue to address top line and bottom line revenues. Because when you're spending elevated capex, i.e., Verizon and AT&T, I'm sure the company and of course their shareholders want to see a return on that investment. So all this really kind of says to me is, I think price increases will continue, um, and they have to. These networks are much better than they were 4 or 5 years ago, and yesterday's prices aren't going to be today's. Unfortunately, if you have these older plans, 20 whatever 17, 18, 19 price plans are not going to be 2025 price plans. It's just not. So the consumers got to get ready for that.
Wrong.
No, it's true. It's true. It's going to happen. It's already happening in 2024. So I don't understand it's wrong, but
It's gonna happen, but
What about the
it's
earnings
happening
per
right.
share?
It's happening right now. It's
B, what about
happening right now.
What about the EPS? That was a thing, a point of contention for a bit of a sell-off on Verizon yesterday. But so they missed a little bit on the EPS, and AT&T hit on the EPS. So I know that you found kind of where AT&T needs to fix some things, like with respect to that revenue, and that's definitely a real thing. That's nothing to overlook. So that if that's something they need to address, I mean, how do we look at Verizon and say, well, how did they miss so badly or so poorly on EPS?
Well, I mean, the reasoning that the company gave was that they just did a voluntary separation package, and of course, that particular amount came out of the profitability from that quarter. They didn't
Gotcha.
backload that or anything like that. So that's the reason why. But if you add that money into the profitability, they actually beat on earnings per share.
On the EPS, okay.
So it's not like there's anything
So basically,
fundamentally wrong with the company.
It was irrational and probably shouldn't happen.
As it always is. I mean, if you look at the stock from today, I mean, I think Verizon gained like 3% today. So, I mean, that's over half of what they lost the day before. It's already back today. So that's generally what happens when Verizon releases their earnings. There's an overreaction for whatever reason, and then cooler heads prevail and they gain that money right back. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. Shout out to Ian. He's always been, the guy that's kind of acknowledged that. So shout out to him for that. And it's true. And that's exactly what happened today. And it's probably what's going to happen over the next few days as well. And then they'll continue to climb because there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the company. They just did a voluntary separation package. That's it. Fourth quarter, they'll probably beat on earnings per share again, like they usually do, or at least at minimum meet on earnings per share. And then what will be the new narrative, especially if they're able to continue along the trajectory of growth in postpaid and in prepaid, prepaid, and then also home broadband. If they continue along that trajectory, which I'm sure they will in the fourth quarter, and they hit on the financials, I mean, you got to consider 2024 to be a success. So, like you said, good quarter from AT&T. They're definitely managing to grow. If I'm a betting man, I would say a lot of the profitability or additional revenue that they're getting from, for example, their fiber to the prim product being sold as well as it is, credit to them. I think a lot of that money is going right back towards these phone promos. They're giving away phones regardless of plan. And I'm sure that's extremely expensive to their bottom line.
Well, it hits their ARPU. I mean, their ARPU is $57. Verizon's is well over $62, and I think T-Mobile's around 53, 54, maybe, if I last remember.
Yeah, so basically what the companies are doing is executing different strategies. So I think it seems to me that Verizon is willing to have a little bit higher of a churn rate in exchange for higher top line and bottom line revenue. So I think Verizon reported a 0.89 and for this particular quarter, and AT&T did a 0.78. So that's a 0.11% difference. That's the delta. But you have a top line revenue of $3 billion of delta. So Verizon reported a little over 33 billion and AT&T did a little over 30. And then when you talk about free cash flow, 6 billion versus 5. So I mean, if I was running a company, I would accept that as a reasonable trade-off. I'm going to have less than 0.5% difference between my competitor and myself from a churn standpoint, but I'm going to bring in $3 billion more than they are and keep $1 billion more than them after all the bills are paid. That's a reasonable trade-off. And I think you can do that when you operate from a position of strength from a network standpoint, since that's really the number one asset that these companies compete with, not phones or anything. It's the network. So if you're operating from a position of strength and you have a better product than your competition, then you can make that call to say, okay, I'm going to sacrifice a little bit on the churn, but in exchange for that, I'm going to bring in $3 billion to my business. That's the difference between us and the other guys, and I'm going to be able to, out of that $3 billion, keep $1 billion.
Yeah, but the net ads don't show that the Verizon network is better than the AT&T network.
Well, I mean, we already know that Verizon is going to be more expensive than AT&T is, and we also know that Verizon's not going to have promotions on phones that are going to be as good. So
Right.
cost still does matter.
Mhm.
I don't think Tesla's going to sell more cars than a Toyota is, but that doesn't mean Tesla's not necessarily a better vehicle. It's just more expensive. So cost still matters when it comes to anything in this life. But at the same time, the product being better, it still matters to the customer as well. Because again, Verizon has the most customers in the industry, the most connections and whatnot, and they're also the most profitable.